The movie begins as we see a group of children playing in a pyramid-like structure, all wearing the same uniform. Elsewhere, several adults are being interviewed before entering a vertical prison known as the platform. They are asked to name their favorite foods, which will appear on the platform daily. Each person is also permitted to bring one item into the prison, and various prisoners select items such as a pen, an axe, a razor, a beautiful painting. Next, we meet a bald man named Zamiatin, who mentions that he wants to eat pizza with a lot of meat every day. It turns out he's here because he tried to set fire to his parents' home while they were asleep. In the following scene, Zamiatin finds himself in cell number 24 with his cellmate, Perempuan. We then notice how the prisoner's daily food moves through a hovering platform that descends from the first level to the bottom. It stops at every level, allowing the cellmates to take whatever they want. This means that there is little to no food left for the lower-level inmates. When the platform arrives at their cell, Zamiatin notices that someone has eaten all of the meat from his pizza. Some people scream from the upper floors, revealing that a man on the 21st floor ate it. Frustrated, Zamiatin picks up a chicken wing and tries to eat it, but a guy named Robespierre, and his cellmate from the upper tier, stop him. It turns out that a group known as the Loyalists has imposed a rule: each person must eat only their own dish, or exchange it for another. They explain that if everyone starts eating other people's food, it will cause chaos, leaving the lower levels starving. An annoyed Zamiatin asks, "What about the guy who ate my meat?" Robespierre responds that those who don't follow the rules, aka barbarians, will always be punished. Regardless, Zamiatin proceeds to eat the wing, but Perempuan also stops him and says that these people are right. She then gives him some of her croquettes, which contain meat. This finally convinces the baldy and he agrees not to eat the wing. But he does warn that he doesn't want any surprises starting tomorrow. Meanwhile, Robespierre explains that while they are in one of the upper cells this month, they may be lower next time. That's why they must think about others and follow the rules. He also urges Zamiatin to eat quickly before the platform moves on, as holding on to food could result in a lethal punishment from the administration. Following this, Perempuan and Zamiatin officially introduce themselves to each other. While the inmates are busy with their stuff, Robespierre suddenly begins shouting again. It turns out that communication has been lost on level 44, and they have no idea if the food has been distributed fairly since. When Perempuan inquires about the number of cells, the Loyalist shockingly reveals that there are 333. Robespierre explains that it doesn't matter how many cells there are, what matters is that food reaches all of them. He says that tomorrow, some Loyalists from levels 19 and 20 will go to the 21st floor to defend Zamiatin's pizza. On the other hand, the inmates from 42 and 43 will also head to level 44. The following day, we see Zamiatin and Perempuan waiting for the platform to descend. But they soon hear that upper-level Loyalists are fighting the barbarian who ate Zamiatin's pizza. Robespierre then orders Zamiatin and Perempuan to break their bed frames and prepare to defend themselves if the situation escalates. But despite his tough outer demeanor, the bald man appears to be terrified. He says that he doesn't want the pizza and pleads with them not to fight. Shortly after, the barbarian lands on Robespierre's cell, and they engage in a brutal fight. It is so intense that they both fall into cell number 24 when the platform moves down. Meanwhile, Robespierre's cellmate desperately tries to get rid of the scattered food in time, but to no avail. As a punishment, her room suddenly catches fire, and she falls onto the platform, engulfed in flames. Perempuan rushes to help the woman and tries to extinguish the fire, while Zamiatin freezes in shock. In the meantime, Robespierre also manages to knock the barbarian unconscious. They then quickly remove the food from their level, realizing that the cell is becoming colder and that they will freeze to death if they hold on to the food for too long. Following this, Perempuan informs them that the burnt woman has died, and she asks what Robespierre plans to do with the barbarian. He reveals that he'll take him to the Anointed Ones. He then informs them about a master, who established all of these rules. Robespierre explains how the master survived without eating for a month, and it is said he cut flesh from his thighs to feed others. Those people became the Anointed Ones, and they now work to maintain the rule for fair food distribution. Zamayatin doesn't believe all this and suggests that they feed the cooked dead woman to the hungry people. However, Robespierre responds that cannibalism is against the law and throws her body down the pit. The next day, the platform arrives at level 24 in perfect condition, and everyone eats from their plates. But then, out of nowhere, Robespierre takes his dead cellmate's food and dumps it in the toilet. The loyalist explains that the law prohibits anyone from eating more than one plate. He insists that no one should profit from another's death and orders them to dispose of the food daily from now on. After saying this, he stands on the platform together with the barbarian and descends in search of the anointed ones. In the following days, Zamayatin and Perempuan continue eating their food without any disturbance. The two also form a close friendship and provide comfort to each other during tough days. They also flush the dead woman's food every day, but Zamayatin takes an occasional bite, which is noticed by the other inmates in cell 22. The scene then cuts to a month later, when the two unexpectedly awaken in cell 180. It turns out that while the inmates were sleeping, the authorities used some gas to knock them out and transport them. Zamayatin is frustrated with the situation and fears they will starve to death. But Perempuan believes that the loyalists will keep the peace and, hopefully, they'll get something to eat. Unfortunately, when the platform arrives later, the two are disappointed to find only empty dishes and no food. In the following days, the situation remains unchanged as the platforms arrive with no food as usual. The two spend the entire day lying down, restless and slowly losing their minds. They become progressively weaker, particularly Zamayatin. One day, a head falls from the upper floors, and the inmates are relieved that justice has been served against those who broke the rules. Meanwhile, Zamayatin continues to cough up blood and becomes increasingly sick, so Perempuan looks after him and places a wet cloth on his forehead. Just then, upper-level cellmates inform them that the anointed ones are punishing the barbarians. A woman reveals that they are looking for several rule breakers, including a fat man in cell number 24 who used to eat the food of a dead person. She asks Perempuan which cell they were in before, and the latter lies, claiming it was 46. In the evening, Zamayatin stands at the edge of the cell, wrapping himself in a blanket. When Perempuan asks what's wrong, he reveals that he intends to unalive himself as he can't take it any longer. He states that he has done many bad things and shouldn't have eaten other people's food. Perempuan tries to stop him, but Zamayatin quickly sets himself on fire and throws himself into the hole. We see him falling to the bottom, where several people watch with amusement.
Quiero pensar que no sufrió.
In the next scene, we see Perempuan waking up in cell number 51. She meets a new roommate, whose left hand has been cut off at the elbow. Thinking that she's a newbie, Perempuan explains the rules to her and asks her not to eat other people's food. Later, a commotion breaks out, and it turns out that the inmates have found a barbarian on level 54 who has attacked his new cellmate. It is revealed that he was in level 2 last month and would eat until he threw up. Hearing this, Perempuan offers to help, but the people below her level remind her that, according to the law, only 2 levels directly above are allowed to intervene. Seeing her so upset, the cellmate is confused and asks what happened. So Perempuan tells her about Zamayatin, who died because of those barbarians who didn't follow the law. The next morning, a woman's severed head is thrown into the pit. The inmates begin to shout that Dajin Bobby, the leader of the Anointed Ones, is punishing the barbarians and will save them all. Moments later, the platform arrives, so Perempuan and her cellmate decide to go down and punish the guy who was wreaking havoc on level 54. They descend below, but the other inmates are reluctant because if they all leave the level, they'll break the chain of communication. Regardless, the women are adamant to punish the guilt. Seeing this, a man decides to stay behind and protect the chain, while the others go confront the barbarian. Shortly after, they arrive at level 54, where the barbarian is waiting for them. He is armed with a sharp object and attacks anyone who approaches him. Everyone attacks him at once, but the man appears tough and manages to kill a few inmates. After an intense fight, he descends down, followed by Perempuan and her cellmate. The The barbarian again kills another man at level 55, but Perempuan eventually pins him down and raises a rod to kill him. However, the man begins to beg for mercy and claims that he only wanted to eat enough food to recover from starvation. After a brief consideration, Perempuan lets him go, and he climbs the platform to go further down. Her cellmate also frantically tries to descend, but she stops her. Later, the cellmate reveals that she has been here for 6 months. She explains that when she arrived, her cellmate, Kekasi, introduced her to the law. She recounts how they both always followed the law and participated in pacifications. But one day, they came across a malnourished boy and gave him some food of a dead person. When Dajin Bobby learned about this, he showed up and amputated her one hand as punishment. However, when it came to Kekasi, she resisted the punishment and gouged the man's eyes out. In retaliation, Dajin tied her naked to the platform and sent her to the bottom. The woman sobs as she describes how she was forced to watch Kekasi being devoured by cannibals. Hearing this, Perempuan is shocked but says that not all anointed ones are the same. But her cellmate emphasizes that no one can survive the pit, and that they will die sooner or later. She then reveals that the only way to escape is during the interval, when the authorities knock them out with gas to change the cells. Perempuan wonders how they will stay awake during that time, to which her cellmate explains that she has been looking for a solution for months. She claims that, in order to find it, they must continue going down. The next morning, they are horrified to see a man, bound and naked, on the other side of the platform. Her cellmate warns Perempuan that they need to leave before Dajin arrives. But, to their horror, the tyrant soon shows up, wearing a cloth over his eyes and looking like a messiah. He and his henchmen capture the 2 women and other inmates who fought against the barbarian the day before. Dajin accuses the women of breaking the rules, noting that only inmates 2 levels higher are allowed to attack the barbarian. He then decides to punish both of them, as well as those who enabled this to happen. Following this, Dajin announces that he will mutilate everyone's hands as punishment. But since the woman is already mutilated, she will be tied up naked and taken to the bottom of the pit, just like her former cellmate. After saying this, the tyrant and his henchmen forcefully begin attacking everyone and cutting off their hands. We see the inmates screaming and crying in defiance, but to no avail. Tragically, Perempuan's cellmate suffers the same fate as her friend and soon passes away. The next day, Perempuan wakes up on level 72 with an amputated hand. She meets an old man named Trimagesi as her new cellmate. Perempuan asks him not to talk to people from other levels, and he replies that he doesn't talk to anyone because it exhausts him. She then asks what object he has chosen, to which he shows her a knife to cut the bread slice. After this, Perempuan recalls how her former roommate urged her to keep going down and find something called the drowned dog. Later, when the platform arrives, Perempuan steps on it to descend, and Trimagesi also unexpectedly joins her. The 2 then go down, and Perempuan encourages the others to join her in the fight for freedom against the loyalists. Most of them are tired of the tyranny, so they eagerly support her cause and join her.
Vamos toda la vida soñando con la libertad. Aquí y tenemos más derechos que ellos. Por la puta libertad.
They then decide to form a large army and wait for the loyalists to arrive before launching their attack. After descending through several levels, Perempuan notices something in the 93rd cell and decides to stay there. Perempuan notices an oil painting in the cell, depicting a drowned dog, and realizes that this is what her former cellmate was speaking about. The following morning, Dajin and his loyalists begin to descend with the platform. However, Dajin strategically orders 2 of his men to stay on each floor above the 93rd cell and remove all the rebels' food whenever the platform arrives so the rebels won't eat anything for the rest of the month. Lastly, Dajin and one of his guys stay at the 92nd cell just to inform the rebels about his plan. He demands that they surrender voluntarily and promises to spare their lives. While some old people agree to comply, the majority refuse as they don't want to return to oppression. Trimagesi then jokingly suggests that they should go down and eat all the loyalists. Everyone finds the idea amusing, so they burst out laughing and chant in support. Days pass, and the rebels go down to the floors below, where they really manage to survive by eating other loyalists, despite Perempuan's refusal to eat. Having had enough of seeing his men get eaten, Dajin and the loyalists finally decide to go down and confront the rebels on the 105th floor. Here, the loyalists and the rebel group begin fighting each other. But during the bloody battle, all of the starving prisoners begin to mercilessly murder one another, regardless of which side they support. Meanwhile, the barbarian whom Perempuan had previously spared approaches her and tries to choke her to death. But, with the help of Trismegisai's knife, she gains the upper hand and stabs the man to death. In the end, we see that only she and Trismegisai have managed to survive the battle. Perempuan then notices a wounded Dajan. The man is on the verge of dying, and he begs Perempuan to kill him. However, she just removes the cloth from Dajan's gouged eyes and cruelly pushes him into the pit. In the aftermath, Perempuan informs Trismegisai that she is escaping this place and asks if he will accompany her. But he decides to stay behind and claims that this was the best month of his life. Shortly before the scheduled release of gas to transport the inmates, Perempuan tears a piece of the oil painting, as instructed by her cellmate, which turns out to contain toxic materials. She smells it, and even eats it, rendering her unconscious, simulating the signs of death for a brief period. Perempuan hopes that the administration will take the corpses out, giving her a chance to leave the tower. Elsewhere, we see some children playing in the same pyramid-like structure as the beginning. One of the kids reaches the top, but soon two adults arrive and take him away. Later on, Perempuan wakes up to find herself strapped to a floating mass of corpses, with people in masks moving the bodies. It turns out this is how they relocate the inmates by activating the anti-gravity system. While the crew is working and distracted, Perempuan takes this moment to break free and hides beneath the bed on level 333. To her surprise, she sees a masked man placing the same child from earlier in the bed. Here, Perempuan realizes they're probably about to starve and torture the child as well. At this point, she must make a difficult decision, either escape the pit and save herself or risk her life to protect the child from the prison's atrocities. Haunted by her past mistakes, she chooses the latter and approaches the unconscious child. But, in haste, Perempuan accidentally hits her head and gets wounded. She attempts to escape with the child, but the injured head causes her to pass out. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself and the child riding the platform to the bottom of the pit, plunging deeper into the unknown. At the bottom of the pit, the two are approached by some starving cannibals. They tell Perempuan that her journey from above has come to an end and that she must stay with them. However, the child still has a chance to escape and must return to where he came from. One of the women extends a hand to Perempuan and, with no other choice, she reluctantly joins them. The movie then comes to an end as the platform rises back up, carrying the child toward the surface. Thus, we reach the end of this film. Thanks for watching. You can like this video to support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Goodbye.